everyone, you are tuning into Agent on Duty with myself, Stacey Prieur, and today I'm talking to my returning guest, Jordan Overholt. Hey, Jordan, how's it going?
It's going great. I'm happy to be back. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been my absolute pleasure to have you back. And one of the things that I really love is I feel like we've kind of like we're growing up in the industry together. So when I originally met you, you were with Chinix Law Practice, and now you've branched out on your own.
Yeah. So January 1st of 2019. So that was after our last time we spoke on the show. I decided to quit my job and venture out on my own. And it was a dream of mine for as long as I can remember to start my own business. And it turned out to be a great decision. It's been awesome.
Oh, that's amazing. Currently, you're servicing London and surrounding area, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, actually, even like with I'm sure we'll get to this, but essentially with computer technology, video teleconferencing, like I'm kind of all over Ontario.
Very cool. So I wanted to get into that a little bit. Like, so obviously you've got a fresh young face. Um,
Thank you.
how do you feel started? Like, what is the average age for a lawyer to start their own practice these days?
It definitely depends on your practice area. I've noticed that there's very, very big differences. Criminal law lawyers right out of law school, some will start their own. It's really common to see that. Solicitor-based practices, you don't see it as much. I don't really know why that is, but yeah. So when I left, I was in my early 30s, and I still kind of am. Yeah, so I'd say that's probably with a solicitor practice where you're going to see people that start a solicitor-based practice in their 30s. You usually need a few years to work up and get your clientele and figure everything out.
So I wanted to kind of talk about how long you've been in real estate and what made you decide to go into real estate law. And do you also, well, I know that you also handle divorce situations because kind of that they go hand in hand sometimes. So what are some of the services that you do offer in your solo practice?
Right from 2014 onward, I've been in real estate almost full time. But I have done virtually every other practice area as well. So I've experienced pretty much everything. The reason I focused on real estate is I found that I really enjoy the fact that no matter what side of a deal you're on, whether it's, borrower, lender, buyer, seller, all sides are working together to get to the closing date and make the deal happen. And I like that cooperative nature of it. Other areas of law, more adversarial, and it was kind of fun when I first started out, but it gets tiring after a while, right? Now, yeah, a divorce, yeah. The family law goes hand in hand with quite a few real estate deals that I handle. So I can handle that, no problem. That's kind of what I focus my practice on these days. I find as the practice grows too, you just don't have the time to handle other practice areas because real estate, as you know, is very, very, very time sensitive, right? Very short deadlines. You don't have time to kind of put everything on hold and go take a litigation case. It's not fair to the clients. So that's why you kind of specialize as you get older as a lawyer, I guess, right?
As much as I'd love to talk about the glamour in going to real estate law, it's not like I can be like, no, I object. Anyways, we are going to cut to break, guys, and then we're going to deep dive a little bit more into what Jordan does with real estate law and a little bit about the divorce side because I did kind of go through this personally, so I'd like to share my experience and just pick Jordan's brain on that. So please stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Stacey Prieur. You've been watching Agent on Duty, and today I'm talking with real estate lawyer Jordan Overholt. So if any of you guys watched, well, all of you guys, you must have watched season 1 when we saw Jordan. And Jordan was working with Chinix Law. Now he's opened his own practice. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the services that he offers, specifically in real estate and divorce. I know with current economic situations, I don't personally, to be honest, I don't know if it's just my age demographic or if what's going on. But I do come across a lot more people dealing with separations. So I wanted to talk about that from a legal standpoint. Before someone's able to sell a home, do they legally have to have a separation agreement in place?
They don't. It depends on what they're doing. So if two people decide somebody's going to keep the house, somebody's not. We just have a savings account. We're going to divide it in half, go our separate ways. No big deal. You can both just sign off to sell the home and split the money however you want. Where you need a separation agreement is in the case where you own a home as a couple, and part of the process is you need to refinance the mortgage to get some extra money to pay the one spouse out to move off of title and then go their own way. In that case, it is a requirement for those types of mortgages to have a signed separation agreement. So that's where you have to get one. And that's probably about 99% of the time when I have a deal like that, there's a signed separation agreement for that purpose. It's just because it's much easier to do it that way than, say, even if you have a large investment portfolio, to start selling your investments. So you don't want to do that if you don't have to, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense in most cases. So
no, and that's what I really wanted to talk to you about, because I know a lot of people, when they are going through these situations, either one spouse has moved out of the house, but they're both still on title. So legally, what are their rights? Like, if the one that's moved out, they want to sell the house, the other spouse is living there and doesn't want to sell the house, that they can actually legally force them to sell it. Am I correct on that?
You are, yeah. In worst case scenarios, you can actually go before a judge and ask for a court order to force the sale if you're a co-owner of a house. Usually, even if people are fighting and they don't want that to happen initially, once the costs involved in something like that for all parties is explained, usually people come together and decide it's not worth it putting up a fight. But you can, in worst case scenarios, absolutely get a court order to force that.
And I know that there's some people that are probably listening to this and that would make a lot of sense to them. Mm-hmm. And as a real estate agent, I do come across that quite a bit, where someone's moved out and they're renting now, but they're like, all my money's tied up in my home. What do I do? My spouse says that it's their property now because I moved out. And that's just legally not how it is. Now, if someone's been living common law, what are the differences with that?
Well, it used to be, as far as I understand it, back before I became a lawyer, before I was even born, it was a little bit harsher for unmarried couples. Honestly, I think it used to be, if the deeds I've seen, the old deeds and the title searches I've looked at are correct, it used to be the husband was on title and wife wasn't, right? There were protections if you were legally married for the spouse that isn't on title, but for unmarried couples there wasn't. And so it was a lot harder to go before a judge and say, hey, I made X number of amount of contribution every month. I should get some sale proceeds here. Since I've become a lawyer, obviously everything's modernized. There's lots of people that don't get legally married anymore. It's very common to just buy a house with your common law spouse. And it still requires some court action in the worst case scenario, but all lawyers understand that the person that's not on title in a common law relationship would still have some right to 50%, or could be even more, of the sale proceeds of a house, depending on the unique situation.
And is that only specifically for the time that they've been in the house? Like, for example, if they lived in the house for 10 years, moved out for 1 year, and then seek legal action, is it only for the growth of the equity in that 10 years that they would be eligible for? Is it for the entire time until that paperwork is done?
It typically, as far as I've seen, it's during the time you're together. But what's going to impact that is if you have changes in other parts of your financial life for each spouse, sometimes it may make sense to give a larger payout from the proceeds of sale, right, to somebody who wasn't on title the whole time. It's totally unique, right? It depends on the circumstances. I know everybody hates when lawyers say it depends, but it really does depend on lots of things.
All right. Okay, guys, so we're going to take a quick break, but when we get back from break, I'm actually going to ask Jordan about a real life situation that I just encountered. First-time home buyers, they're super excited. 2 days after they purchased the home, went firm, windstorm happened, and a tree completely knocked out half of that. Well, not half the house. That's a little dramatic. That sounds more like a tornado. Took out some windows, eaves, sidings, and not all of it's fixed before closing. So we're going to talk about the legal ramifications when we get back from break. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. Hey guys, we are back from break. If you're just tuning in, you're watching Agent on Duty with myself, Stacey Prieur, and my special guest, returning guest, Jordan Overholt, who is a real estate lawyer. We've been chatting all about what happens with divorce and separation and what your legal ramifications or legal qualifications would be when it comes to real estate. Now, I want to get into a real life situation. So Jordan's actually helping me with clients of mine. They're first-time home buyers. They just went firm on a deal, and then 2 days later, there was a huge windstorm in London, and in Wortley Village, there was this old tree completely like crashed through windows, took down the siding, took down the eaves. But here's the interesting situation. This is a century-old home, and it scratched the bubble skylight on the lower roof. So we've been having some issues right now going through at how to deal with that. So legally, I wanted to kind of pick your brain, Jordan. I know that there's been other instances where people open pools and they're not in working order, or fences get knocked down. What happens in that circumstance? Like, who's on the hook for it? Right now, the sellers have gone through the insurance. Everything's supposed to be done. But what happens when those current sellers leave the property? How does that work?
Basically, when you agree to sell a property, you have to deliver it in substantially the same condition it was in when the agreement was signed, right? Normal wear and tear accepted. There is actually, yes, exactly, with quotation marks. There is also a provision in the agreement of purchase and sale about if the house was totally destroyed, right, that the seller holds the proceeds of the insurance for the replacement of the whole house in trust for the buyers if the buyers wish or the agreement's at an end. What we're talking about now, like you just mentioned, right, is damage, but not damage that totally ruins the house. Substantial damage, but doesn't ruin it. And COVID has obviously brought in, with all of the slowdowns in all the supply lines, right, even if the sellers in this case did all the right things, it's not fixed by closing. What do you do?
Yeah.
So in that case, typically, yeah. Resolutions to stuff like that typically go something like this. First of all, you want to find out how much damage has occurred and get an estimate from 1 to 3 different providers, depending on the situation. How much money are we talking about? And then decide between the lawyers, the buyers, sellers, realtors, everybody kind of comes together and we brainstorm, how do we fix it? In some cases, just holding back some money and closing makes sense. In other cases, just cutting that amount off the purchase price totally and allowing the buyers to buy and using their savings to fix it at their leisure is another option. It kind of all depends. This case that we're talking about is still we have yet to sort of decide on everything because all of the information is not known. But I expect it's going to follow the same sort of thing, right? Because at the end of the day, sellers want to sell, buyers want to buy. Things like this do happen. It doesn't kill a deal. It's just you kind of gotta scramble at the last minute to figure out a solution. But I'm confident everything is going to go fine.
I'm pretty confident that we're going to make it work, but it's just one of those things that honestly, I swear to God, I was like, this is the smoothest deal ever. It just went so great. And I'm like, I totally jinxed myself.
Yeah.
And it's funny because everyone's like, oh, Murphy's Law. And I'm like, who is Murphy? And why is he such a dick? I don't know if I that on Rogers TV, but like this Murphy character is not very pleasant. But yeah, so no, I appreciate that, and I appreciate your hard work. And you did kind of mention with the pandemic that things have been slowed down. How has that affected your personal practice?
So really the where I see it the most right now is lenders. Lenders are very backlogged because a lot of the office buildings that house these people that did all the organizing on the lender side for the mortgages, I mean, they were just filled with people. So those buildings now are empty, right? People are working from home. They've got to sort of, connect with their computers at home to the systems at work. It's slow. It's slowed down everything. So I'm getting mortgage instructions on most purchases and refinances 2 or 3 days before closing. So it's kind of, I mean, in this case, in our deal we were just talking about, right, got it well ahead of time. It was great, but a lot of my deals are coming in 2, 3, 4, 5 days before closing. So it's kind of a scramble. We get it done, but it's definitely something I'm careful to tell clients now to come to me. There has to be a little bit of a different expectation for the process. It's unfortunately not as smooth because things keep changing, opening up, closing again. And so everybody's kind of still trying to figure out the best way to work. That's basically it. Other than that, it hasn't really changed that much. I think the only big change in my practice that I do now is pretty much 99% of the time it's a house call. So I actually go to clients' houses and sign the purchase agreements with them like an old-fashioned doctor from the 30s,
Yeah.
which actually people like. I thought they were going to kind of laugh at it at first, but everybody seems to think it's awesome. So yeah, it works.
No, totally. And we are going to head to break, but I want to talk about closing documents and I want to talk about things to be aware of. Again, with the unique situation that we are facing in the last few years, just to kind of, get people into the right mindset. And I will talk about your visit with another client that I had. So guys, we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we will get right into those details. We'll see you soon. Okay, guys, thank you so much. We're back from break. You've been watching Agent on Duty with myself, your host, Stacey Prieur, and my guest today, Jordan Overholt, who is a real estate lawyer. Jordan, before the break, we were kind of talking about how things have shifted right now in the current market that we're in with the lockdowns and everything going on. So one of the things that I thought was really unique is that you're saying that you're offering house calls.
Yeah.
And I have to give a shout out to the Hedges family because they sung your praises. They have 2 kids at home. The fact that they didn't have to schedule a sitter and come to your office, they were so amazed by that. So thank you, obviously, for doing that. I think it really does help people with limiting abilities and people with kids. So what made you decide to go into people's homes?
So I have to say, I did start it actually a little bit before the pandemic started. Basically, what I was finding is that when I had worked at my previous firms, right, doing real estate law, really the only helpful criticism, it wasn't a complaint, but helpful criticism from clients is that they were having to take their lunch hours off and run over to sign documents, or run over before school got out to pick up their kids and sign documents. And a lot of the time it was really stressful. And so when I went out on my own, I started thinking, well, how do I fix it? And then I got into remote signing appointments. So I can come visit you on a Saturday or 6 o'clock at night after you get home from work. And it just took off. And then when some people before the pandemic still wanted to meet at my office downtown, right? They like the traditional kind of setting. But when the pandemic took off, I just started doing, remote or house calls for everybody. And it just worked great, especially because if I'm scheduling house calls after hours or on the weekend, my day during the day is open to deal with issues on closings or to close deals. It actually kind of even freed up my schedule. It made it a lot nicer. It works for everybody, basically. It's been really nice.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad that it's been a win-win.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk to you about closing a deal. So a lot of people, like, sometimes they'll think, the deal's signed, we just send it to you and then it's done. But you have a whole closing procedure, right? So
Yeah.
what are some things that people can anticipate when they are closing a property?
So the first thing is, when an agreement of purchase and sale comes over to me, to my office, right, you open the file. I'll reach out to the client initially with usually a questionnaire, right, or an email. I need to collect autobiographical information from them, a bunch of stuff that I need to prepare the closing document. So you get that up front. They send that back, and then I kind of explain at that point what to expect, right? With clients, it's funny because there's this rush, especially in this market, to find a house, secure it, bidding wars. It gets very, very tense. They sign the agreement, and then it's kind of like hurry up and wait, right? Because then there's this lull where I'm doing my stuff, and they're kind of just sitting there getting excited. What I would do then is obviously investigate the property. You're doing your title search. You're talking with the other law office, other lawyer to work out how we're going to close the deal. Then you're waiting for mortgage instructions because pretty much everybody buys property with a mortgage today. I have a few cash deals, but it's not common. And like I said earlier, those mortgage instructions usually used to come in a couple weeks in advance of closing, now 4 to 5 days. So the clients are really waiting with a lull. And then kind of, 5 days before closing, then they get the email blast with, okay, these are all the items we need. We got to get going. And then we book a signing appointment, 3 or 4 days before closing, and then we meet to sign. They give me their bank draft for their down payment, and then I close the deal and deliver the keys to them, or they get them from the realtors, right, from the lockbox. It depends on the deal.
Yeah, so I noticed the trend has been the realtors are the ones that are dispersing the keys right now. Again, with the way things are. What are some things that people should be aware of with closing? Like, what are some things that have held up closings lately?
Well, I mean, first of all, you know, things that can hold up closing, really, the main one I see is actually not the fault of anybody involved. It's just our banking system. So in Canada, the way that lenders send mortgage money to lawyers' law offices is they use an old-fashioned wire transfer, and they wire transfer those funds to the trust account. The problem is that system in Canada, as far as I understand it from talking to bankers, is very old. It's not what you think it is when you watch movies. It can be delayed. So a lender can say to me, hey, we just wired funds at 9 o'clock in the morning. Everything's great. That's great. I don't get funds until 3 in the afternoon because it has to pass through our old-fashioned banking system. It just takes that long. If you don't get funds in time, you know, you have to extend. That has happened sometimes. It's rare, but yeah, it's kind of stuff like that, right? It's mostly banking related. That's what takes the longest, because most of the work you've done, meeting the client, doing up the file, that is done in advance of closing, right? So that's kind of what causes the issue. The other one is unforeseen damage on the morning of closing, and we have to figure out a solution. Sometimes that just can't be accomplished in the same day. There's not enough time, right? So
no, for sure. So Jordan, if anyone's looking for your services, how would they reach you?
So I have a website, jtoverholt.com. JT, my first two initials, and then overholt.com, just like how it sounds. Phone numbers, 226-926-9007. And my email, jordan@jtoverholt.com. I'm always answering emails, as you know, even 3 in the morning sometimes.
You're a machine, man. You never sleep.
No.
And it's funny because sometimes when I'm working, I'll be working late and I'll send things at like 9:30, 10. I don't expect a response, but like it's like right away. And I'm like, whoa. But no, honestly, it's been my absolute pleasure working with you. We've been doing it for years. So thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate your insights and your time and your attention to detail and taking great care of my clients. I do think that you're one of the lawyers that I've loved working with because everything's usually done on time. There's no mistakes, and you explain things in a friendly, personable manner. So if anyone's watching and they're thinking of buying and selling a real estate property, and you need a lawyer, please contact Jordan. Jordan, again, thank you so much for being on the show. And I just want to say a big thanks to you guys watching. Hope you found the content valuable. And as always, we will see you next time.